The Presidential Precinct is committed to offering a regular program of virtual events that keep our network of young leaders engaged and inspired in their work. Our offerings are threefold, each enabling a unique level of personal engagement with facilitators and fellow network members. First, we have 2020 Talks. These are TED-style talks with equal amount of time for individual presentation and then participant questions. Next, Campfire Conversations are panel discussions reimagined, focused on sharing panelists' personal stories and their work, often across multiple regions of the world. Finally, network members can join us every other Wednesday for a regularly scheduled virtual cafe, an open space for casual conversation and networking on the Presidential Precinct Network. Based on your participation in any of these events, you will gain access to a specific cohort within the network for continued dialogue with the presenters and participants. More information on these virtual program formats and our evolving strategies during this COVID-19 season are available on our website, presidentialprecinct.org. Thanks again for joining us today. Don't forget to share your questions in the Q&A section and keep the conversation going beyond today's event on the Presidential Precinct Network. Now, on with the main presentation.
Welcome, everyone, to our virtual discussion on the important and always relevant topic of advocacy and campaigning. I'm Nancy Hopkins. I'm Director of Programs here at the Presidential Precinct, and it is great to see everybody here today from around the world and the United States for what promises to be a really engaging and intriguing dialogue with Gordon Wong from the Wong campaign. As we get started, I'm going to do something that I did for our last event. I'm going to invite you, and this is purely optional, to introduce yourself in the chat function. Let us know your name and where you're tuning in from. That would be great, so we can get to know each other a bit. And when you do that, make sure that you're sending the chat to all participants so we all can see. Thank you. And just a reminder for those of you that have not attended a 2020 talk before about the format, Gordon's going to give us 20 minutes of thought-provoking insights into the issue of campaigning, and then he'll open up the floor for 20 minutes of Q&A. And for that, he'll use the questions from the chat function. So even as he's talking, start thinking already about things that you might want to ask Gordon, and be sure to put those in the chat. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce Gordon to you this morning. Gordon Wong is the Regional Organizing Manager for the Wong campaign. And as part of the US membership mobilization team, Gordon works to recruit and train and support the Wong campaign's volunteer leaders in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States. He joined Wong in 2014 to help manage Wong's university engagement program and the brand's digital strategy. Gordon's a graduate of the College of Holy Cross, where he holds a degree in religious studies. And before his work at Wong, he worked with the Catholic Volunteer Network, was a staffer on various political campaigns in Colorado and Massachusetts, and he started his career as a community organizer in Chicago. Gordon, welcome, and we cannot wait to hear your insights. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to go share my screen and get us started. Before I jump in, do you see the presentation or do you see my speaker notes? Just want to double check. Thanks, everyone. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Again, my name is Gordon Wong. I'm a regional organizing manager over at the Wong campaign, and it's really great to be back with the Presidential Precinct. I'm a big fan and love the work that they're doing, so it's really fun to be able to join you this morning to talk about Wong and really the principles to Wong's campaign work. And you know, I really hope that in this time together that you'll be able to take on some of the principles that in this talk and thread them into your work and into the tactics into your campaigning. So this is one secret sauce to campaigning. So before I jump into the secret sauce, I'd like to just share with you who and what Wong is. Wong is a global movement campaign to end extreme poverty and preventable disease by 2030, so that everyone, everywhere, can lead a life of dignity and opportunity. One was founded in 2004, so we're really new and pretty young in the development space. But in the 16 years of One's existence, we've had a lot of great victories and a track record of success in terms of ending poverty and passing meaningful legislation to get us to that 2030 goal. We are a global organization. We have offices all around the world. I'm based in Washington, D.C., but wherever we have an office, we have One volunteer leaders and activists championing this work to their members of parliament, members of Congress in their work. And we're not an organization that does any fundraising or public or on the grounds work. So we are strictly advocacy. We are focused on actions and generating a lot of noise in this work to get us to our goal. But then with our vision, I really like talking about our vision just for another moment here, is that our vision is a world without extreme poverty and preventable disease, where people can fulfill their potential and actively participate in the decision making that affects them. This is the world we want. We fight for it alongside everyone who feels the same. It's our job to enable the power of the people to influence the people in power. We won't stop until we're done, because none of us are equal until all of us are equal. I like talking about our mission. That's our North Star. That's what we're aiming for. But the vision is really how and why we get things done and why we do what we do. But really, you're here in the time together to learn about One secret sauce. It's a pleasure for me to share with you the tactics and the principles that are threaded in our work and in our DNA. I'm not giving you any company secrets here, so I'm not going to get fired. I'm not, this is something that, we want to share with everyone everywhere. I also want to preface before I jump in is that, we're a global organization, but in my work at One, I work exclusively with our US volunteers. So a lot of the terms I'm going to be using are mostly US based. So members of Congress, foreign aid, foreign assistance, members of Congress and their staff. So a lot of terms are, US based, but really this work, the secret sauce, is in all our campaign work, whether you're in Abuja, Nigeria, or if you're in London or in Paris. And so, I might shift here and there to talk about members of parliament or ministers, but really for in this context, I'll be using, Congress as our kind of baseline. But, this is what we've done. And, I think this has proven that in our time at One, we've gotten things done with the secret sauce. And so the secret sauce is really the 4 Ps: policy, politics, pop, and people. You'll see this, a lot of them are more explicit than others, but really all these 4 principles are in our campaign work. So I'm just going to jump right into the Ps. We'll start with policy. It starts with an idea, whether it's achieving one of the Sustainable Development Goals or it's a chance to provide first-time electricity access on the African continent. We're not a traditional policy shop, so we have to work with other organizations to do research, to have data, to have these discussions about these ideas and where to start and how do we get things done. We also, as we have these conversations, we write and share briefings and policy reports and recommendations to members of Congress, their committees, ministers of finance, or even members of parliament oftentimes. And they're also accessible to the public. And at One, our policy work is pretty broad, but we work in 5 kind of main buckets. So it's global health, transparency and accountability, economic growth, agriculture, and foreign assistance or overseas development assistance. And, our policy portfolio is pretty broad, and I think it's really intentional because there's no one size fits all solution to ending poverty or preventable disease. But having these 5 big buckets gives us a lot of different entryways to engage on these topics, whether that's vaccines and distribution, or that's, making sure funding for AIDS and HIV programs are fully funded, or it's passing, first-time legislation for electricity access. Policy and these ideas is where, that's really the fuel to getting our work started and our campaign work done. you take that idea and take that policy and you try to fit it into politics. And so for us at One, it really begins with influencing elected officials and decision makers to pass meaningful legislations to fight and end extreme poverty and preventable disease. At One, we are action oriented, so we write letters, we make phone calls, we have meetings, but really it's all about developing long-term relationships with members of Congress and their staff. If you're familiar with our political process or members of Congress, they're usually in their offices and their positions for a really long time. And so, they might not be someone who has a lot of seniority now, but 2, 3, 6, 8 years down the line, they might shoot up that seniority and they might all of a sudden be a chairperson of a committee that's really important to our work. And so, it starts now sowing those seeds and hoping that, they'll grow and, hopefully they'll become a champion for us down the line. But also if there's someone who is important to us now, we're going to continue to let them know why we care about this work. And so at One, we're a bipartisan or nonpartisan organization, which means we have to work with members of Congress from both sides of the aisle. And for 16 years, our credentials have really proven that this works and that we're an effective organization to make change. And so members of Congress, whether they're Republican or Democrat, know that when we're coming in, we're going to come up with a good idea that's smart, passionate, but also an organization that, is going to talk to them and meet them where they're at and understand where they're coming from. That also works with how our tactics as well. And so we want to understand the political landscape. So we're not, here sitting on our hands saying, oh man, I really wish that it was a Democratic controlled Senate and a House and a Democratic president. No, we're not going to kind of wish for something to happen next year or down the line. Like, we're going to think about, okay, we have, a Democratic House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican senator. What are some opportunities available to us to engage on policy and development issues? And we've been able to pass legislation and pass, pledge fundings for Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and the Global Fund to Fight HIV and AIDS the last 3 years with this kind of fractured political landscape that we have. And I think that's because of our credentials, but also the people that we have and the ideas that we're able to bring. And finally, we're in our pragmatic approach to One, we practice a inside-outside game. And so that's just a jargony term that says that at One, we have a team of government relations specialists. So they're our in-house lobbyists. And so they're the ones that provide the kind of daily temperature of what's happening on Capitol Hill, where members of Congress are standing on these issues, and kind of what's needed to kind of get to push them to support us. And then that's our inside game. They're the ones that are on Washington, D.C. doing this work for us every day. And then the outside game is the people, and that's the pressure that we're able to provide and push. And that's our fourth P, so I'm going to save that for a little bit later. Jumping into our third P, it's pop culture. If you know anything about One, we literally have a rock star as our co-founder, and having a literal rock star as your co-founder opens the door to engage the wider public, but also shines a spotlight that a lot of organizations probably aren't able to have because of their work. And so engaging the public and broader consciousness and really the zeitgeist is a part of One's DNA. So we're at music festivals, we're at Austin City Limits, we're out there talking about our work that a lot of organizations aren't able to do. I really do think that the pop culture P of our 4 Ps in our secret sauce is probably the most unique among our colleagues in this space. But if you think about when One was founded in 2004, our pop culture presence looked a lot like this. They're kind of really glossy, really high-end public service announcements that feature mostly white men, mostly Western, mostly American, validators on this work about why you should get involved. But in 16 years, our pop culture presence has really changed and really evolved. 16 years later, there are these social media communications tools that weren't in existence in 2004. So we're actively actively participating in those platforms, but also engaging the wider public means, having different ways to talk about our issues. So that's explainer videos, like at the bottom they're talking about, development finance, or producing really awesome music videos. We have about 10 to 12 now that are feature exclusively our African artists and talent. And in our evolution as an organization, our pop culture footprint has diversified. It's no longer just, white men, American, Westerners talking about this work, but it's Africans from the continent talking about this. It's European comedians talking about this. It's really diversified how we talk about work. And I think that's a really, really good progress that we've made there. I'd also be remiss too if I didn't mention our kind of latest pop culture moment. It wrapped up in June. It's called the Pass the Mic campaign. So COVID-19 has affected everyone everywhere in this work. And the last thing kind of the public needs is to hear from another celebrity to tell you about wearing a mask or practice social distancing. So one, we want to kind of turn it on its head. And so knowing that we have this rather large list of celebrity friends from all around the world, we asked them to pass the mic, pass their social media handles and accounts to experts around global health, economics, politics, and it was a huge success. And so it was kicked off by Julia Roberts having a really awesome conversation with Dr. Anthony Fauci. But if you're able to find it, later on, we were able to have a takeover from the former president of Liberia, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who took over Hugh Jackman's Instagram account. And so she was someone who, was in charge of a country that was fighting a epidemic in her country on the continent. And it was something that I was really moved by, and I'm always inspired by her. So check that out on our YouTube page or on Instagram. And finally, it's people. This is what I do live and breathe. This is what I feel like I'm an expert in, is working with our activists and supporters around the country, but also engaging our activists and supporters around the world. And like I said, our volunteers are everywhere. Our supporters are everywhere. Wherever we have an office, we have a core of volunteer leaders campaigning on this work. And just like our engagement with members of Congress, our engagement with the public is also unique. And so it features people from all political backgrounds and from all walks of life. They're faith leaders, they're business owners, they're military veterans, they're university students, retirees, community leaders, and so much more. And we engage the public and the people. It's because Congress works for them. The United States, these people are their constituents. They need to listen to them. They're the ones that provide the concerns about why they care about this work and these issues. And so, oftentimes it might be the other way around, but, at one, we want to make sure that we have an active citizen core that talks about this work and engages in this. And how we get this done is, in our ideal, engagement is, it features a faith leader, a soccer mom, a college student, and a veteran. That, what are those four people are from all around, have nothing really in common except for that they care about one's mission and one's campaign work. And so, that really moves politicians and elected officials of seeing all of these different entities talking about one issue there. And we've seen it get done and seen success there. And normally our volunteers are engaging Congress kind of like this. They're meeting with them in their hometowns. They're meeting with them at festivals or here in Washington, D.C., generating actions, making phone calls, sending in petitions. But COVID-19, like to them and to everyone here, it's changed drastically, not just in our day-to-day lives, but in our advocacy. And so our advocacy and engagement usually looks like this, but actually now looks a lot like this. And so just because COVID-19 has shuttered us into our homes and with our loved ones, it hasn't stopped us from advocating and campaigning. And so we've been having virtual constituent meetings. We have about 30 or so as of today, 32, I believe, but we're on the hook for a few more this week. But we're still making phone calls. We're still writing letters, just because our lives have kind of stopped, doesn't mean that Congress has stopped working. So they're receiving our advocacy just a little bit more uniquely now. But I've worked at One for 6 years, and these 4 Ps are throughout our work. And so whether it's in our Pass the Mic campaign or electrification campaign in 2016, it's in there. But in 6 years of work, I've observed a lot of things, but I also feel like, there are a couple extra things that really make our approach and our work even better and even more unique. And we're almost done with this presentation, but who doesn't like a few extra things? And so these are my extra Ps, trying to keep with our alliterations. So my first P is being polite. This goes for life, but also in campaign work. Being nice goes a really long way. You have to remember that the staffers that you're engaging, the members of Congress that you're meeting with, they're people too. They're moved by your stories. They're moved by your knowledge and your passion, but they're also affected by your emotions. And being polite, really, like, being nice is just a good thing in general. And so, we're an organization that's not going to scream into telephones and curse them out. We're going to go in there and just put a smile on and know that we might disagree ideologically outside of One, but at One, I care about the most vulnerable people around the world and on the continent, and we hope that you'll be moved as well. And thinking about that long-term relationship, like, you don't want to go in and, like, their first impression of you is just like the screamer, the cursor. Like, you want to go in knowing that you're going to be meeting with them a year from now or 6 months from now. They're going to remember you. And so that's really important in our work. If you've seen any of this work, being persistent is really key to this. And so engaging our members of Congress, if you're a supporter and champion, we're going to cheer you on. We're going to let the press know that you've supported this work, and we're going to let you know that we care about you and we stand behind you. But if you haven't been supportive, well, we're going to continue to raise the heat and raise the noise. We're going to call your office and let you know that people in your district and your state care about this, and you need to care about this too. And I have a great story. We have a member of Congress in the South who were trying to get in, and she was on the fence of whether she wanted to support this piece of legislation, and we were able to mobilize our volunteers in that state or in her district and called her phone Monday through Thursday. And on Friday, she picked up the phone, called our assistant director and said, "Hey, call off the dogs. You can count me in to support this." And so, we have a lot of those anecdotes throughout our years at One of, kind of not bending but not breaking in our work. And finally, it's partnerships. So it's something like One working with the presidential precinct. It's acknowledgement and a little bit of humility, knowing that an organization like One can't do this alone anymore. There's too many issues out there. The world's too big for any one organization to solve them. So we need to work with a diverse group of partners that can help us talk about our work, to advocate, but also to educate and to engage with. And finally, it's working with like-minded and similar minded organizations that are doing this work as well. And so kind of this coalition is what's gonna, I really believe, like, this coalition of like-minded organizations is really what's gonna get us to the finish line. So those are the extra P's in my secret sauce, at least. That's my interpretation of the sauce. And finally, we're at the end of our time together, so I'd love to stay connected with you. That's my email. Give us a follow on Twitter or Instagram. And for those who are interested in getting involved in a time of COVID-19, we have a petition calling our world leaders to support a global pandemic response plan. And so I'll put that link into the chat box, and I'll make sure that this presentation is available to Presidential Precinct as well. So thanks so much for having me. Thanks for listening. I know we have a few questions, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and get to your questions. So I'm going to go into the Q&A so what do teams look like at One? Do you work on all of these issues with all of the Ps? Really good question. So at One, just like a lot of organizations, we have different departments. So we do have a policy team. We do have, I work in the P department. So with our people and our US engagement, we have a marketing and brand team that kind of works on that pop. And then each country doesn't necessarily have like a government relations team. That's a very like US term, but each country that we work in, so in London, in UK, and the Netherlands, we have a designated person that liaises between One and a ministry or members of parliament that way. But really, they work in silos, but ultimately they work together in this. And so sometimes it's the politics that drives the campaign first, or it might be the policy that drives the campaign. And then we can feed that back with kind of what we're hearing from the grassroots as well. So like, hey, like we're hearing that. We just heard from a member of Congress that they don't want to hear from us right now. They've heard from a lot of us, or they're dealing with their issues in their district. Like we need to ease up on, our advocacy right now. And so it really isn't like, I guess I said silo, but really it's a cyclical mechanism in our work. So really great question. Second question, many of us would be thrilled to engage in any of these celebrity voices in our campaign. Do you have any advice for those of us who are still in the early ages of fostering those contacts? Yeah, I think like in my time, it's, you never know what a person will be moved to, why they'll jump into a campaign. And so you just have to exercise a lot of patience and, kind of understanding the audience and having a good goal set from the onset of just like why do you want this person to engage with you, and what's this relationship going to look like, and what are they willing to do. Our celebrity engagement looks from pass the mic to like we have a comedian that's had us tour with her, and during her book tour we were in every venue, and so she gave a couple tickets to us. We were able to table, but also like she gave a shout out to us about from the stage, and not every engagement is like that. But really kind of having a good goal from the onset is really, really important. But also knowing that like maybe they're really passionate now, but maybe they'll cool off in a little bit. But they might engage with you later on. What are some of One's best strategies for getting youth interested in policy issues? How do you get them excited and engaged? That's something that, like Nancy said, I worked with our university and college engagement program for about 4.5 years at One prior to my current role. And one thing that's really nice about our work is that young people are really excited about this work, like especially college and university students, because they might be studying this for their major. They just might have a passion. They have traveled around the world. And so really, I think they already have this issue. It's about us getting in front of them. I have so many experiences of meeting young people who said, I've been looking for something like this. I just never knew you existed. And so really it's about like, how do you break through all the different issues that young people are passionate about? So whether that's college student loans, racial inequities, global development, healthcare, there's a lot of different issues that are taking up time. And so you're not going to get everyone, but I think what's really important is that there are a lot of people who care about this. And it's not just young people, it's retirees, it's faith leaders. It's really about how do you, meeting them where they're at. But also I think what's nice about One is that we're not a fundraising organization. We're not a on the grounds organization. So, people don't have a lot of money these days to, be able to do charitable work. But what they can give and can do is give their time and give their voice to these actions and these issues. And so we're always, at One, we're not asking for your money, we're asking for your voice to engage this broader policy in engage advocacy work that way. How do you recruit your regular volunteers and keep them engaged? How do you reward them and celebrate successes with them? At One, we have a lot of different ways, whether it's college engagement. So we go to college campuses when we kid travel to talk about this work, building, speaking during classes and things like that. With faith leaders, it's really like about, starting with one faith leader at a congregation and then asking if they could reach out to another that way. So kind of it's a different network that way. We also have an online list of people who have volunteered with one, taken action with one, and so hopefully taking one action with one is the catalyst to getting more involved with one, and so hopefully it's a journey with them to get involved with us throughout their time and as a one member. And at One, we are always engaging them. Like we have toolkits that they can look at and read. They have campaign objectives and goals. So whether that's hosting virtual constituent meetings or getting a number of handwritten letters during a festival or during a summer, we have those available to them. And to celebrate successes, like having a campaign win and passing legislation, that's like the biggest win. But we also try to find the little moments to give them shout outs, whether that's on our national volunteer calls and letting them know that they've hit their goal, or I've asked my manager to write personal notes to each of my volunteers for hitting a specific goal or having a year hitting a certain milestone too. And then every year we have most years we have our conference called the Power Summit, and at the Power Summit we have a volunteer dinner, appreciation dinner, and at that dinner our executive director Tom will present a 10-year pin to our volunteers who have been volunteering with us for 10 years, and so they wear it really proudly. It's like silver, and so they wear it on their jackets, especially during their congressional meetings. How does one work with advocates in other countries on global development and rights issues? Do you work in every region of the world? Yeah, I didn't get a chance to say this, but we have offices in Washington, D.C., Ottawa, Canada, Abuja, Nigeria, Dakar, Senegal, Johannesburg, South Africa, London, Berlin, Paris, Brussels. I think that's it. Yeah, those are all the offices. And so in those countries or those offices I named, we have volunteer leaders there. We're not able to work in Latin America, South America, or Asia or Southeast Asia. We're just a small nonprofit that can only work in so many places. So most of the places that we work in have volunteers that engage. This are mostly the G7 and G20 countries. But also our advocacy can only work in functioning democracies. And so, those countries that are open to this type of active citizenry is where we're able to get this work done. I think I'd love, one day to be able to say we have an office in Mexico or in Singapore, where my family's from. But, at the current moment, we're focused on those countries. And really, we're kind of focused on really building up our presence on the continent. And so Dakar, Senegal is our latest office to open, but it's also our first Francophone West Africa office, which I think is really important to one's mission. But even though we don't have advocates around the world, our policy work has a global reach. So we do have a lens specifically on the continent, but the work that we do, whether that's around Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, or the Global Fund, those programs have reached to other parts of the world. So it's not just Africa that receives that is receiving it. It's Southeast Asia, Latin America, South America that are recipients of those programs. Is there a campaign that stands out as your favorite that you worked on? I talked about our electrification campaign. So it was a 3.5-year campaign that I came into kind of in the middle of, around our Electrify Africa campaign. And so at the time in 2013, there was this idea that, really the next step in development is around electrification and infrastructure. And so it's an idea that nobody was really talking about, nobody heard about. And so we took that on because we thought that if you can electrify the continent, everything can happen then, right? Like you can, education changes, hospitals are running, government buildings are running. And so we took this on for a 3.5-year campaign. And that was really where the 4Ps shine, right? Like it was the idea, then running, putting into the politics and the landscape and the changing politics at the time. And then we engaged in a lot of different ways with the public, whether we had a couple public service announcements that had voiceovers from celebrities. We were at really unique festivals around the country in the United States. and then the people, we ended up generating about 400,000 actions to Congress over 3.5 years, like 400,000. And then out of that engagement, we ended up having about, I think, 30 or so new people who became volunteer leaders because of that campaign. So it wasn't just about, hey, let's get actions, but really we took them through this journey, updated them, celebrated the wins when we could, and then gave them an opportunity to be a leader in their community. And that's something that we're really proud of on our team. What social media platform is one finding to be the most effective for advocacy right now, and why? That's a really good question. I think we're still engaged in the top, kind of the big three: Instagram, or Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I think there's a lot of tools on Facebook to engage the public and generate actions. I think we found that, perhaps Instagram isn't the best way to capture actions, but it's really to kind of generate that noise. I think Twitter's been helpful as well. So I don't know if I have the best answer, but I will say that I featured WhatsApp, and I think we have investigated and devoted some funding into kind of how that platform works, especially on the continent. And so I think that's a space to watch in the future, is how we continue to do SMS outreach. And here in the United States, we also do a text messaging action alert as well. And I think that's, we ended up seeing a higher engagement that way, rather than kind of through a Facebook action. So I think if you're able to have it, text messaging is kind of where I think we're moving towards. But we also, it's not a social media platform, but we also email our volunteer corps all the time to take action. So there was one that came out here in the United States that went out yesterday to our senators and to our House representatives. And this final question: how was the working relationship between you and our ex-president from Liberia, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf? Yeah, I think I can send you the if you send me an email, I can get you the kind of the conversation that was had. It's where in that time we had a Ebola campaign petition, so we had about 130,000 global signatures to that campaign that we presented to President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and that was really well received. But I think in a lot of ways, engaging her, it's helped kind of, we've used her knowledge and experience dealing with a pandemic of like what's needed on the continent, and what investments need to be made, not just now, but in the future, to prevent the next pandemic. And so I don't know if we have quite a working relationship right now, but I think having her on Pass the Mic was really just inspiring to me, because she's someone who knows firsthand what a pandemic does to a country on the continent. And so I was just really happy to see that happen. I see Nancy on. I don't know if those are the questions. I'm happy to answer any others that might pop up.
Great. Thanks, Gordon. I'm actually using my moderator privileges to come back on, because I have a question for you. And I'd love to, I think folks might be interested in hearing the answer to this. So, we're all struggling under the pandemic. It's affected all of our operations, whether we're working in the nonprofit sector, the private sector, the public sector, the universities, sweeping impacts. How would you say the pandemic has affected one's work? How are you all pivoting and managing? Any advice for those of us who are struggling?
Yeah, great question. It's affected us. We were planning on working for the first half of the year on securing pledges for the Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, which provides vaccines to children around the world. And so COVID-19 has changed all that. And we were able to have our big conference in February, right before kind of the country went into shutdown mode. So I'm really proud that we're able to talk about our issues then. But, we've been talking quietly about global health security for a number of years. And so finally there's this kind of reception to it that wasn't always there for a really long time. And so we ended up pausing our Gavi campaign, and we launched our One World campaign, which the Pass the Mic work is a part of. And that's our global campaign to advocate for a global pandemic response plan. So that's funding not only the immediate, whether that's for emergency workers and healthcare workers, but also we're going to be talking about equitable distribution really soon, which our partner organizations like Gavi and the Global Fund have a lot of expertise in, and we're going to be relying on them. But also, we've, rather than kind of having, in-district, in-state meetings with members of Congress, talk about our normal kind of slate of advocacy issues, we've changed it to having virtual conference meetings like Zoom or on conference calls to talk about this. And it's been really, really fun. Like I said, we have about like 32 meetings that we've had so far, and we have a bunch more scheduled throughout the next couple of weeks. And so that's been really awesome. And I think that's inspiring for our volunteers to know that, like, the work continues, even if these shutdowns and people are working from home, that, they're dealing with technological difficulties just like us, and they're still open to our advocacy. And I think one has a unique opportunity to talk about this, given our track record on other global health work, but also our policy know-how on prevention and global health security.
Great, thanks for that. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear how nimble one has been to be able to make some of those pivots and to continue your important work, even operating under some constraints that we're all under. So maybe just one last question. So what are you most excited about for the future of One? What do you think the biggest opportunity facing One as you look ahead? What are you excited about and enthusiastic about?
Yeah, I haven't had to think about this in a while, but I think the first things that comes to mind is just like our footprint on the continent and developing leaders and volunteer leaders that way. In Nigeria and in Senegal, we have a program called the One Champions. And so they've launched those programs now, and they've had about, in Nigeria, it's about 50 each year for the last like 3 or 4 years. And so that's just really inspiring to know that these working adults want to learn organizing and advocacy tactics, obviously not on a global scale, more for like their direct, in-country opportunities. And so that's the first thing. But I think for me, it's continuing that journey with our volunteers and bringing new people and helping them realize that the power they have in the political process. And, I love every time we're able to come to Washington, D.C. and have our big advocacy day, having someone who said, I'm really nervous, Gordon. I don't really know how I feel. I don't know how they're going to respond to this. And I try to coach them through and say, it's going to be okay. But then they go through their meeting. It's a breeze. It's super easy, super well received. And then they come out of it. And I usually just always try to have a quick debrief in these meetings and say, how did it go? And they're like, that was awesome. When do we do this again? And luckily for them, it's a day full of meetings, so they get to do it all day. But I think it doesn't matter if you're a young person, a college freshman or a sophomore, or a retiree or a teacher from Nebraska. Like, everybody has a chance to talk about these issues. Everybody has a voice, and everybody has that power, in my opinion. And it's, for us, we try to just give them that space and opportunity to activate themselves on that. I have the easy job. They're the ones that are really the ones that do this work and really are the faces and arms and legs of One wherever they go.
Well, I actually think that's a perfect place to wrap up. It really struck me when you said, everybody has the power, everybody has the voice. So even though we wish you could be by our side coaching all of us as we try to advance our own policy goals and our organization's goals, it is important to remember that we've got what it takes. So we really appreciate you taking the time to share your nuggets of wisdom with us, so much good practical advice. I think it was also a really timely point to have this conversation. In so many countries around the world, including our own, we're seeing increased polarization in the political sphere. And I think it's really good to be reminded that it is possible, for leaders to coalesce around important issues that advance the public good. And it's important to be reminded too that our voice is important in that process. We can help people coalesce around important issues that matter to all of us. And so it is a good reminder and a beacon of hope, I think, sometimes when we get frustrated with our political system. So I would be remiss also before we close if I didn't mention that we selected this topic at the request of one of our network members. He's actually an alum of the presidential precinct. His name is Radu Rakoto Samimanana, and he's from Madagascar. And he had put in an idea and said, hey, it could be really neat to focus a future event on advocacy. So we were really delighted to pick up on that suggestion and wanted to let all of our network members know that we're open to hearing your ideas about what topics you'd like us to focus on for future 2020 talks, campfire conversations, and virtual cafes. So we are listening and we're here for you. So let us know if there's a topic that sparks your interest. And thanks to Radu for putting this one on our screen. So, and with that, I think we'll close maybe with some words that Gordon said in the beginning about one's mission. I also wrote it down because it was so powerful. He said, none of us are equal until all of us are equal. And I think that's just a really important thing for us to remember, those of us, everybody here, and the members of our network who are committed to social change. It's just such a positive and powerful statement for us to keep in mind. So Gordon, any last words before we close?
No, it was my pleasure. Stay connected. Thanks so much to Nancy and Drew and Hannah for putting this together and having me. So I'm leaving this morning a little bit more inspired and a little more energetic from just your questions. So thanks everyone and best of luck.
Great, thanks so much. And Gordon is going to pop in actually to our virtual cafe. So keep your eyes open for an announcement about that. And that'll be a chance for folks on this webinar, but also others to engage with Gordon in a really fun and informal way. So please keep your eyes open for the announcement about that date. Thank you. Great to see everybody. Take care.